Welcome to Your Intended Message, the perfect place for leaders and promising professionals who want to convey the intended message for greater success. Every week, we interview experts who can help you communicate more effectively, whether that's one-to-one, one-to-few, or one-to-many. And perhaps the most important conversation, one-to-self. I'm your host, George Torok. My guest today is Sam Horn. There's 3 facts you should know about Sam. 1, she was the founder and executive director of the Maui Writers Conference for 17 years. And while there, she helped thousands get the book out of their head and into the world. 2, among other books, she's the author of Tung Fu, Pop, and Got Your Attention. She's spoken around the world, and some of her better known clients include Boeing, Intel, Cisco, and NASA. Perhaps you've heard of them. And finally, most importantly, she offers real life stories and actionable insights you can communicate with effectiveness and impact. Sam Horn, welcome to Your Intended Message.
Thank you, George. I've really been looking forward to sharing some stories and some actionable insights with your listeners.
Wonderful, and it's a delight to have you back again. Sam, you help people stand out in a crowd by helping them use words in a more creative and memorable way. How do you do that? And where do you start? So if let's say I'm writing a promotion for an event, or I'm writing a description for a product, where do we start?
Well, I hope that people have pen and paper, George, because in 17 years of Maui Writers Conference, our best-selling authors, whether it was Mitch Albom or Dave Barry or Frank McCord or Carrie Fisher, they didn't agree on anything except this. Ready? Ink it when you think it. So if people have paper, I want you to start thinking of what is something you're going to be writing or sharing or presenting or proposing, because our goal is to come up with a repeatable, retweetable rally cry that they remember, that they relate to, and that they're motivated to act on. So ready?
Let's go.
All right. Now, this idea is actually based on something that Gary Marshall said. Did you see the movie Pretty Woman by any chance?
Oh, yeah.
Good. Well, millions of people have seen that movie, and Gary Marshall was one of our favorite keynoters. He said something so profound. I remember it as if he said it this morning. He said, Hollywood directors can predict when their movies will make money based on one thing. Do people walk out of the theater repeating something they heard word for word? Because see, if they walk out saying, make my day, show me the money, I'll be back. When someone says, seen any good movies, they're talking about your movie, and they're talking about it in a way that motivates other people to want to see it. So see, they become like a brand ambassador. They're taking you viral, right? Okay, so here's the question, George. When people finish listening to this webinar or podcast, what can they repeat word for word? It's like when we write a LinkedIn post, what can people remember of what they read? When we introduce ourselves on a Zoom call, or when we give a virtual presentation, what can people repeat word for word of what they heard? Because if they cannot repeat it, they did not get it. And if they didn't get it, we're not going to get what we want, whether it's their business or their follow-up or their phone call or whatever. So here is the very first step to creating this repeatable, retweetable soundbite that helps imprint our work in a way that people can remember it and or act on it. Ready?
Let's go.
Step number 1, what is the action you want people to take, the change you want them to make? Step number 1. So what is, in one sentence, the action you want people to take or the change you want them to make. And now the reason we've got to get it down into one sentence is because if I start talking and I don't stop, you can't repeat that. It's out of sight, out of mind. And we don't want to be out of sight, out of mind. We want to be in sight, in mind, and top of mind. So it's our job to get it down to one sentence. Okay, so let's go through this and then let's do it for you. Sound good, George?
Let's do that. Yes.
Okay, so that's number one. Now, our goal is to, number two, make some of the words alliterative. Alliteration is when words start with the same sound. Now, just listen to how clunky this sounds. If I say bed, toilet, and shower, if I say Dunkin croissants, if I say best purchase, if I say Rolls Jaguar, it's kind of clunky, right? Duke Ellington said, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. They don't swing. They just sit there on the page, right? So now let's make those same words alliterative. Bed, bath, and beyond. Dunkin, donuts. Best, buy. Do you hear how when words start with the same sound, they make us instantly eloquent? They make our language lyrical. Now, by the way, George, this isn't word play. This is word profits. I'm going to give you a quick example because, as you know, pop is not just coming up with taglines, repeatable, retweetable sound bites or memes. It's actually coming up with a book title or a presentation title that are a name of a business that can help it stick with people. So do you drink coffee, George?
I do.
Okay. Have you ever had one of those hot cups of coffee and you put one of those cardboard insulating sleeves around it to keep from burning your fingers?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's hard to build a business around an unpronounceable name. It's hard to build the business around an unpronounceable name. See, cardboard insulating sleeves kind of leaves me cold, even though it's a hot cup of coffee, right? Some of these I just do for myself, George. So Jay Sorensen saw a business opportunity. He took this clunky name that people couldn't repeat or remember, and he turned it into Java Jacket. Boom. He cornered the market. George, this is a multi-million-dollar market. He said people who mean to call his competitor call him because they can't remember their competitor's name. So see, that is the power of alliteration. So take that sentence that we've crafted and we would start using the thesaurus. By the way, what's another word for thesaurus?
Not me.
That, George, that's another one I do just for myself. I promise I'll stop. Okay, because chances are when we start crafting that with alliterative words, it's already going to be more memorable. Now let's go down to the next step. Put the words in a beat so they're easy to repeat. Put the words in a beat so they're easy to repeat. I can't believe I ate the whole
thing.
Okay. Takes a licking and keeps on
Ticking.
Oh my goodness. George, guess how old those taglines, slogans, memes are?
Many decades, I believe.
They are. It's 50 years. Alka-Seltzer, and Timex, 50 years. And yet, guess what? Those words were on the tip of our tongue, the top of our mind after 50 years, even after probably not hearing those slogans for years. I mean, wouldn't we want our slogan, our meme, our soundbite on people's mind decades after they heard it? So put it in a beat to make it easy to repeat. And once again, this is not word play. This is word profits, George. Do you know that the slogan, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas? It is estimated that has helped Vegas make more than $1 million in profits because it's top of mind, right? People think about it, they say it, they repeat it. They're thinking about Vegas, etc., which goes to show, once again, this is not just semantics. This is actually could be the difference between whether your business succeeds, whether you get a book deal, whether you get hired, is whether people relate to, remember, and can repeat your slogan. Now, the next one is rhyme is sublime. So step 4 is rhyme is sublime and is remembered over time. Now, once again, I want to make a business case for why this isn't just trivial stuff, that it actually can save lives. The US government was concerned about injuries and fatalities in accidents. So they mounted a multi-million-dollar public service campaign and they called it Buckle Up for Safety. Oh, nobody noticed. Nobody changed their behavior. Nobody cared. So they went back to the drawing board. And as the comedian George Carlin used to say, what did we go back to before there were drawing boards? I said I would stop, and I haven't stopped, George. I got a million of them. Okay, so they went back to the drawing board, and this time they came back with a rhyme, click it or ticket. Guess what? Compliance went up, injuries and fatalities went down. That is how important it is what we're talking about. You know, buckle up for safety. Nothing happened because the words were so clunky. You put it in a rhyme that's remembered over time. People are actually motivated in 3 words to change their behavior, and it reduces injuries and fatalities. That is the power of what we're talking about. So we're not just talking about coming up with a meme that takes your work viral. We're not just talking about a phrase. You know, we're talking about if we really care about our work, whether it's a cause or a campaign, to the degree we use these ideas is to the degree what we say gets noticed, related to, remembered, and acted on.
Now, I find it fascinating that those phrases that stick with us, we haven't purposely memorized them. We haven't worked on it. You know, like I think of all the work we do at, if we go to school or we take a course, we learn something and we study and we still, you know, sometimes we pass, sometimes we don't. But those phrases, it's like they've drilled a hole right into our brain, and not only are they in our brain, but they're accessible, instantly accessible. And these techniques are some of the characteristics that make that happen. Now, curious, when you said that what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Now that's not rhyming and it's not alliteration. Why does that work?
It's got what's called iambic meter. Ta-da, ta-da, ta-da. There is a cadence to it. This is almost like a word puzzle. And it's like a jigsaw puzzle. And the words just kind of fit, right? What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? So do you hear the inflection is actually deliberately made there? The repetition is not a rhyme. It's the same word. However, the cadence of it, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Now, do you see how what happens is like 3 syllables, right? What stays, so you elongate the stays so it mimics the same cadence. And would you like another incredibly inspiring example of the power of what it is we're talking about?
With a setup like that, Sam, I have to say yes, yes.
I guess that is your basic rhetorical question, isn't it, George? Okay. Both my sons went to Virginia Tech, and they were there when a very disturbed young man took automatic weapons and killed a number of faculty and students. And as you can imagine, the entire town of Blacksburg and the entire school and the faculty and the parents and the students were devastated by this. And the next day they held a gathering in Hokie Stadium, and 60,000 people were in that stadium to try to pay homage to the people that had been injured by this or killed. And my sons were both in that stadium, George, and they said that speaker after speaker got up and talked about the horror and the nightmare and the tragedy and the killings, and that the mood of everyone was incredibly dark. Now, Nikki Giovanni is a poet at Virginia Tech, and she understood that she understood why this was happening, and she understood that the power of a poet is to lift us up and move us forward, right? So in the middle of her planned remarks, she looked around, and that empathy, she felt how people were feeling, and she knew they needed something else. And she said, "We are Virginia Tech. We will prevail. We are Virginia Tech. We will prevail." And George, Tom and Andrew said 60,000 people stood up on their feet and picked up that chant. And that stores in Blacksburg turned it into banners and put it on their windows. And they made wristbands out of it, and people wore it, because the power of "We are Virginia Tech," 7 words changed the focus of all of those people to come together instead of being pulled apart in the face of that tragedy.
Wow. Wow. And the right, you're right. It was an incredible example. The right words that respect the situation, but still bring people up.
It's and when we get into both the mechanics and the motivation of it, George, is that I will always be grateful to Arthur Levine. He is J.K. Rowling, who wrote the Harry Potter series. Arthur was her editor at Scholastic, and he was one of our speakers at the Maui Writers Conference. And he came up to me after he saw me MC, and he said, "Sam, I love the way you speak. You put space around your words." Thank you, Arthur. Now, so let's add a technique here, and I call it pause and punch. Because so often when we speak, George, we do what's called rush and blush, especially if it's high pressure. We want to get it over with, and we're racing through our material, and people cannot remember it. They cannot repeat it when we're racing through it. It's just a jumble of torrent of words, right? So when we do have a phrase that pays, and that's what we're talking about, a phrase that pays. It pays in attention, it pays in repetition, it pays in motivation, etc. When we do have that, we want to pause before it, boom, 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 and say each syllable with intent and with that cadence. Because as you said, George, there's a musicality to this. We are taking words that we're racing through, or that are flat, or said that are monotone, and with our deliberate, intentional inflection, we are embedding it with this harmony that resonates with people, and that in a way they may not even be able to pinpoint why it resonates with them. It's harmonic. It has this repeatability. And so when we pause and then punch, even when we say our name, George, if we say, so George, how about please say your name, if you would.
My name is George Torok.
Okay, good. See, George, as you know, many people, they descend. When they say their name, they trail off at the end, right? And people are going, what? And often they won't ask, can you say that again? Or I didn't get that. They just won't get the person's name, right? And now that person's out of sight, out of mind. So when we say our name, just as you did, if we say, my name is, pause, 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 George, space, and then I would punch, Torok, because I bet people call you Torok or all kinds of different pronunciations, right?
Right, yeah, Torque.
Torque. So see, we might even paint in the sky. When I'm working with people, especially if they're giving a high stakes presentation, and we want the people in the room to remember their name, because we want them to look them up afterwards, or reference them afterwards, or book them in the future, etc. It's like, my name is Sally Bedrosian. And you see how when I paint in the sky, Bedrosian, it goes back to what you and I talked about earlier. People now are seeing it. Look at, if I say my name is Sally Bedrosian, it's like, what? Didn't get it. Out of sight, out of mind, right? My name is Sally Bedrosian. And I would hit the Bedrosian because in punching something, it gives it that musicality, that inflection. And now people are much more likely to mimic it the way we said it, which is a way to imprint it.
And what I have noticed is that many people, they rush through the name and they don't have a space. So you're not actually sure where the first name ends and the second name begins in some cases, especially if it's an unusual name. You know, if it's Clark Kent, okay, well, yeah, that sounds familiar. I can get that. But what if it's several syllables or a name we just haven't heard before? We need that emphasis. One of the guests coming up on the podcast is Rob Ferray. And when he said it to me, if you read it off the page, it looks like Rob Fur. But he said it specifically, and I remember it because he said it's Rob Ferray, rhymes with hooray.
Boom. Now you've got it. In fact, so see, what you're bringing up, I'm so glad you're bringing this up, George, is that if we want to be remembered, if we want our message to stick with people, if we want what we care about to actually move forward, it is our responsibility to deliver it in a way that makes that easy, right? So a lot of times people say, you know, my name is Rebecca, and I hate it when people call me Becky. So why not in the beginning say, you know, my name is Rebecca, and thank you for calling me Rebecca instead of Becky. Or as he did, my name is Rob, pause, 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 you know, paint in the sky, Ferray, pause, 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 rhymes with hooray. Now, one more thing, let's talk about tone, is that we deliver it with this warm smile. Because now it's not just about the language or about the words, it is about the emotion, right? It's when I've had the privilege of giving 3 TEDx talks. And when I was giving the TEDx talk on intrigue, I knew that I needed a repeatable, retweetable rally cry that I bookend at my talk. So at the end, people could repeat it, right? So, just try and find something that rhymes with intrigue. However, I kept playing. This is wordplay and it is word profits. And I finally came up with, if you want to intrigue, big smile, you must intrigue. You must, if you want to succeed, you must intrigue. If you want to succeed, you must intrigue. Now, do you see how though, if you want to succeed, you've got to intrigue. Downward inflection, bury it. No. Eyebrows, smile. If you want to intrigue, it's a sentence stem that's kind of a question, right? Now people are waiting for the other shoe to drop. And when the other shoe drops with a rhyme that bookends on a word that was said, and you notice succeed and intrigue don't really rhyme. They have the same long E though, don't they?
Yeah.
If you want to succeed, 2 syllables, succeed, you must pause, 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 wait for it. Big smile, intrigue. And now elongate it instead of bury it, not intrigue, right? No, intrigue.
Interesting. Harvey Mackay wrote many books, and one that caught my attention was Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. And it's about networking. And however, when he talked about it, he just said, dig your well before you're thirsty. And I thought, no, he's saying it wrong. It's dig your well before you're thirsty.
Well, George, Harvey ought to put you on salary because you just demonstrated how even if we craft something with the right words or with a compelling idea, an intriguing idea, they can still fall flat if we deliver them flat. And that's why if I'm working with a client on a TEDx talk or a very important presentation, we actually mark up their notes like a musical score. Forte, pianissimo, so that we have vocal variety, right? So that it flows like a symphony. We elongate words so they're actually beautiful to hear. We punch things that we want to highlight, we want people to remember. We may even deliberately get soft and slow, face it, the situation with Virginia Tech was a horrific situation. And it would be a disservice to what happened there and all the people who were affected if I raced through that content. It would really feel disingenuous, wouldn't it? It's like, no, I was thinking about the families and the students and the faculty and the people that have been in that situation. And when I put myself back in that situation and felt what that must have been like, then my voice hopefully was full of the emotion that I was feeling. And it created the connection, because I was not just saying words. I had put myself back in that situation and was reliving it as if it were happening right now.
And that's something, that tone of voice and that putting yourself in the situation, that's probably something that leaders, both political and business leaders, need to do when they are when they're going through a crisis within a crisis of any sort, and they're the leader, they're the one that's speaking. It's not enough for them just to get up there and say the right words. We need to hear in their voice that they mean what they're saying, for one thing, and that they're in touch with the situation. And probably the famous example, I can't remember the CEO's name, but when the oil well that burned in the Gulf, and the CEO was caught on camera saying, "I just want my life back." Like, give me a break. What do we care about you?
See, George, you're bringing up a very important point, is that we're talking about dissonance and resonance and congruence, right? And when we are communicating, it really is not just about the language or the words. It really is about the emotion and the intent and the empathy. And did you ever have the privilege of hearing Captain Jerry Coffey speak by any chance?
No, but I know of him.
Mm-hmm.
He served. He was a prisoner of war in Vietnam, I believe.
That is correct. And at one point, Jerry was one of the top 5 speakers in the world. And I remember having an opportunity to talk with Jerry because, he had given this talk hundreds, perhaps thousands of times at that point. And he was really struggling with whether he could still do this in integrity. And he realized that the key was, it may have been the 1,000th time for him, it was the first time for them. And that the key to this was, instead of, he could do this on automatic pilot. He could kind of give this speech in his sleep if he wanted to. However, he didn't want to do it on automatic pilot. Once again, that would not be in reverence of what actually happened, and it would not connect with people, because it would have that dissonance, that incongruence, where the words are being said and the person is not even there. And the key is that he would put himself back in that situation, and he would talk about what it was like when he heard the boots coming down the path. And he was wondering if they were coming for him. And if so, how long they were going to take him away for this time, and what they would be doing to him again, and how he would persevere. And he talked about the tap code, that he and the other prisoners had devised so that they could communicate. And he's tapping on the lectern even as he's speaking. And George, it was such an amazing example of how Jerry stayed in integrity, delivering a talk that he had done many times before, because he was not mouthing the words. He was not on automatic pilot. He was reliving and reenacting that in a way that people were there too, and then hooking and hinging it to like a difficult situation that they were dealing with. You know, a situation where they didn't know if they could persevere, a situation where they didn't know what was coming and how they could. And so that's one of the reasons Jerry is one of the finest individuals and speakers I've ever met, is because of his integrity of his messaging and understanding he had a responsibility to deliver it with heart instead of just with a mouth.
That's powerful, Sam. And the lesson I see for listeners is that they need to bring that same integrity when they are introducing themselves, when they're delivering that 60-second introduction, or when they're delivering their sales message, and they might have introduced themselves hundreds, thousands of times. However, that listener is hearing them for the first time. And in saying your name, introducing yourself, or talking about what you do, you need to look like you're actually excited to be talking with somebody, even though you've done this thousands of times before. That's the lesson I think that more people need to take away.
See, George, you've really surfaced what is at the center of what it is we're saying, is that I'm writing my new Tung Fu 2 book. The original one's been out now for 25 years, and I have the privilege of doing this with my son. And Forbes called Andrew a Dale Carnegie for the digital age. And Dale Carnegie said we can make more friends in 2 months by becoming genuinely interested in other people than we can in 2 years by trying to get people interested in us. And that is the river that has run through our conversation. Is it, once again, it's not just semantics, it's not just wordplay. What we're talking about is understanding that messaging matters, how we craft what we say, alliteration, iambic meter, rhyme, brevity, etc. It all matters. And yet, if it is delivered without heart, without presence, then those words can fall on uninterested ears. And that if we truly want to connect, it is our responsibility to do both. It is the craft and the art and the heart of connecting.
Powerful words. Sam, I know you are running a masterclass in January of 2021. Tell us who should be there and why.
Thank you, George. It's like Jerry Garcia of the band Grateful Dead said, it's not enough to be the best at what you do. You must be perceived to be the only one who does what you do. And there are a lot of people who are really good at what they do. They're a very good chiropractor. They're a very good speaker on conflict management. They're a very good leader or entrepreneur about team building. And yet not a lot of people know about that expertise, or know about their book or their presentation or their e-course, etc. So what we're doing in this Pop Masterclass is, what is something you care about? What is something you want to break out in 2021? What is your contribution? Pablo Picasso said, the purpose of life is to find your gifts. The meaning is to give them away. Well, how can we get really clear about our gifts? And then how can we get them out in the world in the way that other people value them and want to try them or buy them or hire them or work with us? And this can be done in integrity. And that's what we'll be doing in this masterclass. We'll have pop seats and worksheets. It's what's something you want to succeed in 2021. Now, how can we make that happen? By helping it stand out in a very noisy world.
An attractive opportunity for those listening. And the way to register for that masterclass is at the website Intrigue Agency, intrigueagency.com. And I imagine there will be links there, but just in case, there's the end of the address is intrigueagency.com/pop masterclass. That's pop masterclass. And the special offer for listeners and viewers of this podcast, mention my name, George Torok, and it doesn't matter how you say it, just mention it, and you will receive $100 off your registration. And it's an attractive offer to begin with, and $100 even less in your pocket. It's more in your pocket, and you get the benefit of that. My guest today is Sam Horn. Delight to have you on, Sam. And for a reminder to folks out there, it's not word play, it's word profit. If you like what you heard, remember to like, comment, and share this podcast. Come back every week for more practical insights to help you convey your intended message. I'm your host, George Torok.